Welcome back and hello if you're new. So, following their 2016 effort Echoes of the Tortured, Sinsaenum are back for another round of death metal. Returning this year with their brand new album Repulsion for Humanity, the all-star cast once again beckon us to return into their death metal lair.
You see your face twisting with fear, with your eyes questions of me, and you can scream 'cause no one.
So for those who may be unfamiliar with the band, Sinsaenum was born from the idea of one Frederick Leclerc, who was of Dragon Force. Wanting to put together more of a death metal aesthetic in terms of songwriting, Leclerc then began speaking to ex-Slipknot drummer Joey Jordison, who immediately said that he was keen on the project, and slowly but surely it developed from there. And now it encompasses vocalist Sean Zatorsky of Darth, as well as the esteemed Attila Sihar of Mayhem. However, due to scheduling conflict, it's worth noting that Attila was unable to be part of the recording process of this album, so is not actually featured on the record. All of this is then rounded off by Haymoth on bass and Stefan Bouriez on guitar. Repulsion for Humanity is very much an album that straddles various different genres, but I feel that it's most akin to death metal for sure, with elements of groove metal as well as thrash metal. For example, the verse section of Final Resolve is really strangely like Obituary. However, you've also got some classic old school death metal influence in Insect as well. Then we move to I Stand Alone, which almost has a kind of Crowbar-esque vibe to it. You know, it's very sludgy, it's quite slow, and it's quite doomy. However, Rise of the Lightbearer is definitely full-on thrash, potentially one of the most thrash-oriented songs on the record. Whereas Sacred Martyr has a kind of groove metal section going on.
I've been chosen to be a martyr, to be an experiment. You will be the thing.
Which overall sounds really well put together. It's almost as though the band are somewhat caught between this American death metal and European death metal. You know, there were elements that reminded me a lot of Severe Torture, for example, from the Netherlands. However, on My Swan Song, it leans more towards a kind of American style to it. My Swan Song is also 8 minutes long, which I believe it doesn't necessarily have to be. Again, in Repulsion for Humanity as well, there are these Slipknot-esque breakdowns. There is that small amount of influence that is brought in there, particularly with the bridge section where they scream, "Spill the blood." And there are some interesting guitar solos on the record, for example on that Crowbar track, I Stand Alone. And then on Rise of the Lightbearer, there's an incredibly death-sounding solo, particularly in the second section. However, I do have to say that probably the best solo on the record is that of Sacred Martyr. And I feel that that's because they really understood the melody of the song and how it would incorporate itself into a solo. It's also a statement to the consistent drumming ability of Joey Jordison. It's so fantastic now that he's recovered from the illness. The band have also done away with those kind of weird sections where they're almost intros, which really broke the album's flow for me, and instead have had small introductions of keyboards and, you know, like atmospheric sections like The Sound of Wind on My Swan Song, or kind of these spoken words sections on Nuit Noire.
1,000 fixed eyes into eternity staring at me.
However, this does lead me to my other point, which is the playing is solid, but it's not quite at that level of spectacular, you know, where there is this really genius songwriting that would bring them above their peers. And in terms of the negatives, there are a few on this record. Personally, I think the songs are just a little bit too long. The final track, Forsaken, is just under 10 minutes, and it really doesn't need to be that long. I feel that if Sinsaenum really kind of trimmed the fat, they would have such a more accessible track. There were some sections where I did find myself kind of going in and out of it. The songwriting is there, it just feels as though it needed to be a little bit more explored, but perhaps we might see that on the third album. In terms of the artwork, Sinsaenum's artwork is very much this kind of Photoshop style that was prevalent in, you know, 90s death metal, which kind of, it suits the sound really. Overall, it's, I don't know, it just seems a bit kind of forgetful, but that's just my take on it. With Repulsion for Humanity, Sinsaenum have created a 90s throwback that calls to the ideas of 90s death metal, thrash metal, groove metal, and all the other subgenres that encompass it. Doing away with those fragmented introductions, the band have somewhat tightened things up, but I personally feel that it might be just a little bit too long. However, there are some sections on the record which do go on far longer than needed, and overall do give the album a difficult sense of pace, and for that reason I'm going to give this record a 3.5 out of 5. I'd also like to dedicate this review to Steve B, or Steve Run With Metal. Thank you so much for your support, dude. I know that you asked this as a recommendation and I'm happy to do it. On that note, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure that you hit that like and subscribe button. Also share it if you can, that'd be amazing. Make sure to drop a comment. You can also check out my Apocalyptic Anniversary series over on Metal Sucks. Oh, and I also wanted to say, sorry about not having anything out last Friday. I had all of my deadlines with university and it was just incredibly hectic, and I just had to prioritize my university. I'm sure you guys understand. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week for another review.